Hello everyone. In our last video, we discussed about Gradio. In this video, we are going to apply the knowledge and build a Python API for ComfyUI. We are going to use Gradio as our front end, which will use the API to connect to ComfyUI, which will be running locally on my machine. But this can be done even if ComfyUI is running on a server on the internet. For those unfamiliar, ComfyUI is a front end for stable diffusion. It uses a node-based workflow, and stable diffusion is a technology that uses AI to generate images. Now, when we talk about API or application programming interface, this enables us to bridge the gap between two different software applications. We'll be able to establish a communication between one application with another application, even if those two applications are of different technologies. Now, since we are using Gradio as our front end, we can essentially use any device to connect to the back end. So we can use a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, or a desktop PC. We send the request via our API to the backend. The ComfyUI workflow will execute, generate an image, and send that image back to the requested device. I will start by making a very simple example, just connecting Gradio with the ComfyUI backend. So here is example number 1, where we are going to just have an output and a generate button. When we click on the generate button, it goes to the workflow and generate an image displayed on our Gradio front-end interface. For the second example, we are going to build on it and add a text prompt. This is going to serve as our positive prompt. The stable diffusion requires a positive prompt as an input. It goes through the model, and the model takes that input and generate an output image from it. For our final example, we are going to change from a text to image workflow to an image to image workflow. So we'll be able to add an image as our input image, and then I've added some example sliders and props that you can use as a reference in case you are trying to build on it. When we click on the submit button, the image will be uploaded on the server. Now, in this case, it is my local computer, but if ComfyUI was running remotely, it will be uploaded on that server, and then ComfyUI will take that image as an input, generate an output for us. Now, before we begin, I would like to give a big thank you to Musty for being my very first subscriber to this channel outside of family members. So very big thank you to you, and thank you to all for watching this video in advance. Let's get started. So the first thing that you want to do is to create a project directory. Now, in my case, I've created a folder called code, and inside it, I have a virtual environment. If you did not follow my previous example, to create a virtual environment, you will do python -m venv.venv and then press enter for it to create the virtual environment. And in order to activate it, you will do .venv, so your virtual environment name, scripts, activate. As for the dependencies, you will need to install requests, hello, Gradio, numpy. Now, next you want to create a new file. You can call it app.py, main.py. I will just go with app.py. I will start by creating the Gradio interface, as it is fairly easy. You will need to import Gradio. Here I am importing Gradio as gr. Then I will create the interface. The interface will require a function, inputs, and outputs. For the function, I will just name it as generate image. For now, I'm just going to pass. For the input, I will leave it blank. For outputs, I will put it as image, and just so that we have something on the screen. I will call this interface as demo, and then I will do demo.launch to launch the Gradio application. Next, go into the terminal and do python app.py. Once your Gradio application is running, click on the URL, or you can copy the link and open it in your browser, and you should see an output. Then we have a generate button just below it. Okay, so now that we know our Gradio interface is working, let's take a look at ComfyUI and see how we can get the API from it. Just in case if you don't have a ComfyUI installation, you will have to go to the GitHub link, scroll down into installing ComfyUI, then click on the direct link to download. You will get a zip file, extract the file, and then open a terminal, navigate to the path at which you've extracted the ComfyUI installation, then just do run _ NVIDIA GPU. If you have a GPU, if you don't have a GPU, then you will do the run CPU version. This will install ComfyUI, give it about 5 to 10 minutes. Once ComfyUI is ready, it will open a web page where you can see a basic workflow. This is a text to image workflow. For our first example, we are going to use this workflow. Now, one important thing is in your load checkpoint, you will see a checkpoint name. Just make sure you're downloading a stable diffusion checkpoint and is storing it in your models folder under ComfyUI directory. So if you already know about ComfyUI, you've generated a couple of images using ComfyUI, go ahead and modify these nodes. For me personally, I've changed the checkpoint. I've changed the positive prompt, the negative prompt, just some safeguard text in there. I've changed the case sampler steps count to 8. This is just because I am recording. I do not want to wait for a long time for an image to generate. I've changed the CFG scale, and then just to know that these images were generated by our API, I've changed the save image file name prefix to text API. I will do a quick test just to make sure everything is working by clicking on the Q prompt button. And if I go into my terminal, I will be able to see if the image is generating. So in here, it loaded the model, and the progress bar will tell me whether my image is being generated. We are going to use the same thing when we will be using our front end to generate the images. Okay. So as we can see, it generated an image. Now, the quality of the image is not really important here. I'm using a low step counts as well. If you navigate to your ComfyUI installation, and then you go into the ComfyUI folder, output folder, you should be able to see your images there. I have the test API version 1, and then as you can see, it's the same image. The way I found out about the API and tested my theory was to go into the developer options. You can do so by pressing Ctrl, Shift, and I on your keyboard. Then go into the network tab. Click on this little icon here. It's to clear the network history, and then make sure that this button is under recording. Then click on the Q prompt. You can cancel it afterwards. Go into the first entry. It should be prompt. Double click on it, and you will see that it opens a URL where we have the local host, the port on which ComfyUI is running, and then we have /prompt. If you go back into ComfyUI, you go into payload and you go into that prompt, you will see everything that you see as inputs here corresponds to a node in our workflow. So using this, we'll be able to write a request, send that request over using this type of payload. So let me show you how you can get an example of this. Close the developer option, and on the right side, click on the little gear icon, and then click on the enable dev mode options. Make sure that it is checked. Go all the way down and click on the close button. This will give you save API format option in your menu. So I will be using this workflow. If you're using a different workflow, load that workflow first, then click on Save API Format. This will save a JSON format file. Click on Save As. Now, to make it easier to work with, I will be saving this file in my project directory. I will go back to Visual Studio Code and open the Workflow API seed.json file. All right, so in here we can see we have inputs, and it is telling us that the seed is this, the step count, CFG count. These were the values I changed in the ComfyUI node-based workflow, and it is being reflected as JSON in here. Similarly, if I scroll down, I can see my checkpoint. I can see the positive prompt, the negative prompt. Scroll a little bit down, I'll be able to see the file name, and somewhere there is the file size as well. So here we have width and height, and that all of these corresponds to these nodes here. So going back to my Python file, I'll need a way to load this JSON file. I will go at the top and import JSON. JSON is a standard Python library, so you do not have to install anything. Then I will open the JSON file, so the workflow API.json in read mode. I'm naming it as file JSON. Then I will use the JSON library to do JSON.load and load the file. Just test, I'm going to comment out the code below and going to save this data as data, and I will do a print with data. Now pay attention, I did not do load with an S, loads. This is because the file is already in a JSON format. We'll do python app.py and test that yes, I'm able to correctly load the workflow. Now next thing that we want to do is to send this workflow over to ComfyUI to have an image being generated. Now if I go back to ComfyUI interface here, and if I show you the network prompt once again, this prompt, it's a post request. So when we are making our API request, we will have to do a post request to this URL. I'm going to create a variable at the top for the URL. Now to keep things organized, I will create a function which I'm calling as start queue, which will take a workflow as the input. Then I'm going to create a prompt variable. I'm calling it as P. This is going to hold the workflow, the entire workflow that we are seeing at the bottom here. Now, in order to send the request over to ComfyUI, it needs to be in a particular format. One thing that we've already seen is the post request. The second thing is we need to encode it using UTF-8. So I'm going to encode the data, the prompt into UTF-8. And then at the top, I will have to import the request library and then do a post request to the URL. I can replace this with our URL here. The data is going to be our prompt that we are encoding to UTF-8 at the top. Now, just to clean up the code, I'm going to move this with opened file inside our generate image function, and then to test if it is working, I will do start queue. The prompt is going to be this prompt here. We'll change the name to prompt. Okay, so just to recap, we are importing our libraries at the top. We'll need to send the post request to this URL. If you are connecting to a ComfyUI which is running on a server remotely, then you will need to get the IP address, replace this part with the IP address or the URL, and then make sure the port is correct. The / prompt, that's one is standard. Then you need to create a post request, get the payload, encode it into UTF-8, and then send it as a post request. Okay, so at this point we can test, and I just have my Windows arranged here. On the left side, I have my Visual Studio Code with the code at the top, the terminal at the bottom. The top right is the ComfyUI terminal, and as you can see, we have prompt executed there. And then at the bottom right, I have ComfyUI running, and you can see queue size as 0. So I will go into the terminal for the Python Gradio file. I'll do python app.py to start my Gradio application. Once the application has started, I will click on the link. Okay, so this is my Gradio application, and pay attention to the ComfyUI terminal as well as the web interface. I will click on the generate button, and as you can see, it says got prompt executed in 0 seconds. And let me do it again and pay close attention here. As you can see, it says prompt executed in 0 seconds. If I click on it again, it will show prompt executed in 0 seconds. This is because ComfyUI is very efficient. If the last seed is the same as the current seed, it will not execute anything. it would just give you the same output. And that is the reason as to why we are getting prompt executed in 0 seconds. It's not generating anything. So if we want to see a new generation, you will have to go into the workflow API.json, scroll all the way up until you see inputs, seed, and then you have a seed number. Change the seed number to anything that is different. Restart your Gradio server and click on the generate button. Now you can see that the ComfyUI terminal is showing got prompt and we have a progress bar. All right, once the prompt has executed, if you go into your ComfyUI output directory, you will be able to see the generated image there. Now, one thing to note here is in the web application, it does say queue size 1 if you paid attention to it, but you will not see the output image in the save node or preview node. So our Gradio application is able to communicate with the ComfyUI front end. However, it is not really doing anything. All we have is a button where we click on it, it generates an image. We have to go into the JSON file to update any of the values. So this is what we are going to do next. First, we'll try to see how we can output an image directly in the Gradio application. This way, we don't have to go into our output folder to look for the latest image that was generated. Now, go back to the app.py file, the Python file. Since we will be working with a folder, the ComfyUI output folder, we'll need a way to access that folder. So I'm going to go to the top and do import OS. I'm going to create a new function just to keep things organized. We'll call it get latest image, and it will take a folder as an input. Next, I want to get all the files in that folder. So the folder is going to be the output folder, and I want to get all the images from it. Now, this next part may be a little bit complicated for beginners, but I'm going to explain it. So what we are doing here is a list comprehension where we are checking all the files from the os.listDir function, and we are checking to make sure that the file has the .png, .jpeg file extension, and only those files we are taking them and putting them in a list, saving it as image files. The reason as to why I'm doing this is because I want to order the file according to the last date modified. So the OS module provide a get time function, and using it we can do a sort to get the latest file. Okay. So I'm just making sure that we have a first image there. Just in case the file directory is none, I'm going to set it as none. So basically that person or the user has never generated an image. The file directory will be none. Otherwise, I will just take the last image from that folder. Then I'm going to use the os.path module to create the file path. So we're just going to do is the path join, take the folder, so that is our base folder, and then the last generated image file name, join it together to get the file path. Then lastly, I will return this latest image. So going into the generate image function, just after start queue, I'm going to call the get latest image function, and I'll have to pass in the path to my ComfyUI output folder. So I'm going to go to the top, create a variable, and I'm going to call it output dir, so output directory, and this is just my ComfyUI output folder directory. I'll use this variable in my get latest image function, and there is a little bit of mistake here, but I will leave it just to show you what I mean. Now I'm going to close my Gradio server and restart it. See what happened when I click on the generate image. It got a new prompt. Okay, it's completed, but on my Gradio front end application, nothing is happening. Let me do a print statement and you will see what exactly this get latest image is returning. I will close my server, restart it again, go into the Gradio application, click on the generate button, and at the bottom you can see that we have the file path. Let me modify the seed to 2 just so that we have an actual generation here. And look at the bottom here. If I click on the generate, right away I'm getting the file path, but the generation of the image has not completed yet. Okay, so this means that our application is going through, start the queue, sent the request, and without waiting for the image to generate, it's trying to grab the latest image, which obviously is the wrong one. As you can see, it's grabbing the 5th image, but the latest image is number 6. So to fix this, we have to tell our application what was the last generated image before sending the post request, and then do another check to see if we have a new image that does not match the previous one. So let me write the code. I'm going to create a variable. I call it previous image, and then I will use my get latest image to get the file path. This will run before starting a queue. Now, after we've sent the queue over to ComfyUI, we are going to start a while loop, and then every time I will try to get the latest image. So a loop will just keep on going over and over, and it will check if we have a new image in the output directory. So I'm just doing a check if this latest image is not equal to the previous image. So the previous image is before the queue, the latest image is after the queue. If those two images are not the same, then we know that we have a new image. I will be returning this new image, and since this is a function, the moment I do return here, it will break out of the for loop and break out of the function as well. Now, the while loop will run every frame depending on your computer. So to add a little bit of delay, I will import time, and then I will do a time.sleep for 1 second. This way the loop will run every second. Let's close the server and restart the Gradio application. Refresh the page and click on the generate button. Now we can see we have a new problem. On the right side here, we can see that the prompt got executed for 0 seconds, but our Gradio application is still showing as pending. So it is within the while loop here, and it will never break out of this while loop because the previous image will always be equal to the latest image, since our ComfyUI did not execute and generated a new image. And again, this is because the seed number is the same as the previous image. So I'm going to close the Gradio server, and I will have to kill the terminal for this. So I'm not going to fix this issue just yet. Instead, I'm going to change the seed number to 3, which is different, and then restart my server. Refresh my Gradio application, click on generate, and this time we can see Gradio is waiting here, and the terminal on the right side, it is showing that it got the prompt and it's executing right now. So it's completed. We can see a new image number 7, as well as the Gradio application showing the same image here. So if I open the image, we can see it's the same exact image in both, right? So we were able to grab the new generated image from the ComfyUI output folder and show it on our Gradio application. Now, in case you're wondering, how do I fix the issue of having the same seed? Then you will have to go deeper and implement the same efficiency that ComfyUI is utilizing. So somewhere in your application, you will have to cache the previous seed and then check if the seeds are the same. If there were any modification to the seed, go ahead and generate a new image. If the seed is the same, then just return and don't do anything. However, this implementation as well is flawed because in ComfyUI, you can modify anything after the key sampler. So for example, let's say you modify the file name, which is after the key sampler. Even if the seed is the same, ComfyUI will generate a new image and save it under that new name. So that is why I'm not going to fix it, because there's a lot of little things that you will have to take care, and it is outside the scope of today's video, which is about building a Python API for ComfyUI. We are not really making an efficient Python UI API, instead just making a working Python API here. So I'm going to continue with example number 2, where we have some inputs. So I will start by adding the positive prompt to our interface. Right now it is bare bone. We only have the output image and a generate button. So going back to the app.py, if we go into the interface, you will see that we have inputs, and right now it is blank. It's an empty list. So adding the positive prompt is very easy. All we have have to do is say we want a text prompt as our input. I'm just going to say positive for the name. And at the top here, you see that we are loading the workflow. So if we go back to the workflow, we can see it is a JSON, pretty similar to Python dictionary. We have a number 3 here. If we go down a little bit more, we see a number 6, and the number 6 has inputs. Inside of inputs, we have text, which is the positive prompt. So if we modify this line here, we will be able to type any positive prompt, send a new request, a new post request to ComfyUI using the new positive prompt. So let's implement it. So right now I'm saving the JSON, which gets converted into a dictionary inside of prompt. So all I have to do is do prompt access number 6, access inputs, go into text, and then modify it. So I'm doing prompt 6 inputs text, and then modifying it with a prompt text. Now this prompt text is coming from the text that we have here. So I will have to modify the name to prompt text. Okay, so text that we have under inputs will send over to generate image prompt text, which will be replaced here. So if I say in my prompt, I say monster will be replaced here. Let's test by closing the server, restarting the server, and do a refresh. In case your Gradio application is not refreshing, you can press Ctrl F5 to force a clean refresh. Okay, so we can see text, prompt text here, which is the positive prompt. Let's try doing a cat, click on submit, and you can see the Gradio is waiting, and ComfyUI says got prompt, and we have the progress bar generating the image here. So we got a cat, and at the bottom, we can see we have number 8, which is a new file. If we go back into the workflow API, you can do the same thing for the negative prompts. You can modify the file name prefix. You can go up and you can modify any of these values by simply doing this. All you have to do is do prompt access whatever number you need. So we can do another example here. Let's say you want to modify the step count. We'll do prompt number 3, modify the first one to 3. I need to go into inputs and then steps, and then this needs to be something. So at the top of my function, I'm going to say step count, and then I will pass this here. I also need to modify my interface. Right now I have text, which is referring to prompt text. I need to add one more text, which will refer to step. Save it, close my server, restart the server, refresh, and right away you can see I have my positive prompt at the top and step count. So I'm just going to do 4, click on submit. On the right side, we can see the terminal, and it's taking that into consideration. So 4 steps here. Okay, we got a line. Now at this point, you pretty much have all the knowledge needed to make a good text to image workflow. So any text to image workflow, if you need to modify something, you can just add it as an input and then just modify this part here. Next, I want to show you how to use an image as an input and do an image to image workflow. So for that, we'll have to go back to ComfyUI, and you will need to load a workflow for image to image. So the only thing that you need to change for a basic image to image workflow is the empty latent image. Delete it, add a VAE encode, and for the pixel, drag it out. Use a load image node. For the VAE, you can use the built-in bake one, or you can load a VAE. All right, so I've loaded an image. I've changed my checkpoint. My VAE is there. VAE encode is there, connected to the latent image. I'll also need to modify the denoise. We'll say about 0.5, and then I have the text prompt, which we've already seen. Once I have the workflow, I will click on the Save API, click on Save As, and because I want to use the workflow underscore API.json name, I will replace my previous workflow JSON file with this new image to image work. So if we open the workflow in Visual Studio Code, we can see we have the previous seed there. I'm going to change the step count. I forgot to change that in the workflow. We'll change it to 8, CFG to 6.5, The denoise is at 0.5 right now. It's good. We have a text prompt, but we can modify the text prompt from the Gradio application. Since I do not have a field or negative, I'm going to modify it. And then if we go all the way down, we can see the node 11 inputs image. We have test.jpg. This is our load image node, which is telling us which file we want to refer to for our image to image. So pay attention to the test.jpg file name. This is important. So for now, I just want to make sure that my workflow is working correctly. So I'm going to close the server, start the server once again, but using the new workflow underscore API.json file. Go into the Gradio application, refresh. I'm just going to modify it, click on submit, and check my ComfyUI terminal. Okay. The steps count, we got a new image, and let's just check test the input image. So we can see that it is different. The denoising strength is maybe a little bit too low, but you can see here there are like poles, but in here we don't have that. So it took this input image and generated a new image or an image to image workflow. Now what we want though is to have an input image box here where we can drag an image into that box, or maybe take a picture using our phone and then use that image inside of our Gradio application, send it over, and then have it generate a new image. So let's implement that part. So because we want to use an image as an input, we are going to change our inputs in the interface to image. If I close the server, restart it, you will see right away that we now have a place where we can drag and drop images. We can click to upload. And if I were to open this Gradio application on my smartphone, I would be able to use my camera to take a picture. Our Gradio application doesn't know how to handle the image. So I'm going to go modify it and say input, and I have to work with this input image now. We'll remove the positive prompt and the steps count. Okay, so going all the way to the top where we have our import statements, we will now make use of the two remaining libraries. So I will import NumPy as np, and then I will do from build import image. So once I have my workflow loaded, I will use image to do from array and pass in the input image. This is going to be my image. The reason as to why I'm doing image from an array is when we use the Gradio application to load an image, it will load it in the form of a NumPy array. And in order to get a full image, a pillow image, I will have to convert it from an array into an image format from the pillow library. Now, once I have the image, I will do a simple calculation just to resize the image into a 512 by 512 resolution. The reason as to why I'm doing this is because when uploading images, the images may be of higher resolution. For example, my smartphone can take images at a resolution of 4K. Sending a 4K input image over to ComfyUI is very taxing on the system. That is why I want to resize it to 512 by 512. So first, I want to get the image and get the minimum size from it. This can be the width or it can be the height. Once I have the minimum size, I will do 512 divided by that size in order to get a scale factor. Then I just need to get a new size, the width and the height. I will be multiplying each side by that factor to downscale the image. Okay, and I'm calling this new image the resize image. Once I have that resize image, I need to save it as test.jpg. If I go back into my workflow, this is the name that ComfyUI will search for. Now, since I'm making a video here, I will put underscore API just so that we know this is the new file. Okay, and to save the file, we just need to say resize image.save and pass in the input folder for ComfyUI. In my case, it is in the ComfyUI folder input, and then I have the test underscore API.jpg there. This will save the file. The next step goes into getting the latest image. That's good. We are going to start a queue, which will take this new file as the input and then do the rest. So I'm going to go down close my server. I'll restart my Gradio server, refresh the Gradio application, and then just choose an image here. So I'm using this bottle as an input image. If I go into my workflow API, my text prompt, so the positive prompt, is still the default beautiful scenery, nature, glass button, landscape one, the galaxy purple button example. I'll click on the submit button. The Gradio application is listening, and we have the ComfyUI terminal that is showing got prompt, and the progress bar is there. Just wait for it to complete. Okay, so we have this input image. It took this input image and modified it to whatever this is. Now, if I go into my ComfyUI installation folder, ComfyUI inputs, one of these files will be test_API. It's the one that is saved by our Gradio application using the pillow library. Okay, so essentially what we did right now is we took the Gradio image and save it in the input folder for ComfyUI. And this is going to work even if you have a tablet or a phone that is taking pictures. Okay, so on the right side here, I've connected my phone to my computer so that you can see the screen. I have to disable my camera for that. I will close my server, my Gradio server, go all the way down where you have demo.launch. Inside the launch function, you can set share equals to true in order to use the Hugging Face space. Restart the server, and this time it may take slightly longer, and that is because it's actually creating a public URL. And in here I have this public URL. If I copy this, go into my mobile phone, go into your browser, paste the link, and as you can see, we have the exact Gradio application. So at the top we have the input image, the output, and again the output. So on the phone here, I'm going to click on the drop image here. This will ask me for access to my camera as well as phones and videos. Click on load, and then I want to click on camera. This will request access for my camera, and now it's asking me to take a picture. So I'm just going to take a picture here. I will accept this photo. And now this is my input image. Okay, so I have my ComfyUI terminal here. We'll click on submit. And as you can see here, it says got prompt. I have 8 steps going. So the prompt got executed, and on the right side we can see it's telling us that Gradio may break. That's okay, but at the bottom we can see the output. So I think this is a good stepping point for today. We were able to see how to use an API to connect Gradio application with ComfyUI. We've also seen how to add inputs, different types of inputs. We've seen the positive prompt as a text input, as well as a step count, which is a number, but you can use the text input for that. Remember that we are sending the information across the internet, so everything can be an input prompt. We've also done one where we have image to image, and we've taken an example where we are using a smartphone camera to take an image and then use that as image to image to generate from ComfyUI. Hopefully this video was helpful and gave you the knowledge, the fundamentals that you require in order to make your own thought in using Gradio. Thank you for watching this video until the very end. This video was very long, so hopefully you were able to get something out of it. Please consider liking this video. It helps me. Subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more videos like this. I will see you in the next one.